Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's just past 1 o'clock. I'd like to call the 12th meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee to order. Please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenapehoik, and Adirondack. We honor and respect the history, languages, and cultures of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pacpec@london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. At this time, I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I will move to a consent item. We only have one today regarding our housing update, so I'll put that on the floor, looking for a motion to receive. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. So now I'll open the floor for comments. I'll go to the mayor.
Yes, thanks. I'll just make a brief comment on this. So I think this has been really good work by Municipal Council and our staff over the past year to ramp up council-generated approvals. When you look at the change on the things that we can control, and that's permissions that council can provide, it's dramatically up from where we were. And if we set a target of 47,000 new homes for the province, the one thing that we have control over is how many approvals we're actually going to make in this chamber, how many permissions we're actually going to give. But what we know is not all of those permissions come to fruition in the short time frame. They do over time. So there is absolutely work to be done on the side of transitioning the council-generated approvals into permits being drawn and issued and actual homes being created. Because ultimately our goal here isn't just municipal permissions, it's places for people to live. Recently, I met with Minister Calandra and representatives from the development community just here at City Hall to talk about some of the challenges that are being faced by the development community, the not-for-profit community, and those who are involved in the home building spectrum. I certainly feel like the province is committed to trying to reduce those barriers, and I know that this council also has tried to remove barriers, streamline processes, and continues to do that work to bring permissions to fruition. The economic climate, too, is beyond both of those governments' control, with interest rates being a significant barrier to home buyers entering into the market. That can create some challenges with demand that we've been seeing. But what we see is the Bank of Canada sending signals that they're moving in the right direction on that. And I think our municipal permissions that we've created through the first half of this year have positioned us very well to take advantage of improving economic conditions and have those backlogged, pre-approved permissions transition into units for this community in a time frame that is reasonable to try to meet the demand that's out there. So I know Minister Calandra himself was very impressed with the numbers. I don't know if it'll come up at the AMO conference. I know he gets to give a big speech, but not every community has been in the position that we've been in to actually generate the types of permissions that we have. And there was a lot of discussion about what have we done to try to foster that in this community. So I just wanted Planning Committee and Council to know that this sort of work is being recognized and noticed by the province of Ontario, and that we continue to have a collaborative discussion with the development community, the not-for-profit community, the province of Ontario, the federal government, and as a municipal government, as partners within the housing spectrum, with the view of shared responsibility to work on what are the barriers in changing the municipal permissions that we've been able to drive in London into actual homes for people to build and live in. And I think that that is really important work moving forward, but I also think we need to continue to generate the types of numbers that we've seen, and I just appreciate the work of this committee as a key component in that process. So I just came to share some of those thoughts today. with committee. And certainly it's a report to be received for information. So, there's no decision points right now, but this is certainly something that I think members of this committee and municipal council should be proud of the work that they've done on the number of permissions they've been able to generate through the first half of 2024. And of course, thanks to all of the staff who do the work on the back end to make sure that we have the opportunity to have these before us for decision. So I just want to share those comments, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll look for other comments from committee members. Seeing none, if the committee will permit me a few words, just I won't repeat what the mayor has said. Over the last few years, we've seen the committee do good work with staff on getting many units zoned for building. I think today we see 1,000+ units on the docket as well. Quite an ambitious target of 47,000 homes, but there was concern from me personally, and I think others in the committee, and we were doing okay in getting rezoning done, but it's getting shovels in the ground. I think economic circumstances with interest rates probably being the primary one, and inflation driving costs up. We saw that lagging behind the rezoning efforts. Now that we see interest rates at least leveling off and with signaling that they will start to come down, boy, we're seeing building permits go crazy. So Mr. Shaw, great work with your team, because they're going to be busy, which is good. And Ms. McNeely, always fantastic work by your team in getting these plannings, rezoning to the committee in good shape. I know there's a lot of work that's done behind the scenes to before it comes to us that we can deal with it in the proper way. So thank you to you both, and thank you very much to your team that works very hard on behalf of London to address our housing concerns. If there are no other comments or questions, then we have a motion moved in second. I'll call the vote.
I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you. Moving on to scheduled items, 3.1, dealing with 379 Southdale Road West. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Robin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Any questions of a technical nature for staff and committee? Seeing none, then I'll ask if the applicant is here and would like to address the committee. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm an urban planner with Civic Planning and Design. Representing our client today, Lost Cycle, who is the applicant for the zoning bylaw amendment at 379 Southdale Road West. Lost Cycle is a proudly local spin studio with 2 locations in the city and just celebrated their 5-year anniversary of opening earlier this week. The basement unit within the existing multi-tenant commercial building was recently leased by our client, with their goal being to relocate and reestablish an indoor cycling facility there. The proposal before you seeks to add the commercial recreation facility use to the list of permitted uses within the existing ASA 1 zone, which would ultimately allow for this cycling facility use. There was one public response that was received in relation to this application, which related to stormwater and sanitary capacities in the area. And just to clarify that this zoning bylaw amendment is simply requesting for the allowance of an additional use, and no changes to the existing building or site are proposed whatsoever. I want to thank Brady Bonello and the rest of planning and development staff for their work on this proposal. We are in full agreement with the staff recommendation. We appreciate your time and consideration of this application, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for any members of the public that would like to address the committee regarding this item. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. There's no one online. I don't see anyone in the gallery, so I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll on the floor for committee members. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I'll put the staff recommendation on the floor.
Okay, I look for a second. Councillor Rahman seconds. Motion moved in second. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3.2. This is regarding 553 to 557 Upper Queen Street. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions from committee for staff? Seeing none, then I'll look for the applicant. If the applicant would like to address the committee, please, sir. Give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Matt Campbell, partner with Zelenka Priamo. We are very excited to be in front of Planning Committee this afternoon for this townhouse proposal over on Upper Queens. I'd just like to let the committee know that we've worked very well with staff, and we want to thank staff for their participation and work with this project. We did have a public engagement session, an open house on February 13th, in which quite a few members of the community came out. There was some constructive criticism that we took through that process. We made some changes to the plan, and that's the plan that is in front of committee today. Happy to answer any questions, and certainly would support the staff recommendation to approve the zone change as we have requested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'll look for any members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item. Please, sir, give us your name. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Vogel. I live 3 doors down from where this planned urban blight is set to begin. I understand that this meeting is nothing more than a foregone conclusion and that this meeting is only be done to fulfill a legal requirement. To those watching at home, I would let this serve as a cautionary tale to you. While urban blight or infill is not happening in your neighborhood, it will be coming to your area next. Now, the first question is, as far as asbestos in these units, what will be done to mitigate exposure? My other question would be to the council members in general. When did building a house with a yard become so unpopular? Like a yard with a child that could actually have a swing set and play in their own yard. Now we just rely on parks. Well, parks don't create revenue. Parks cost money. They cost money because they need to be maintained. But we want to build parks instead of building houses with a yard where a kid can play. Finally, infill, or as I like to call it, urban blight, is being sold to the population as the way to ease the population boom to the area. If infill is the only way forward, then how did the development south of Pack Road between Colonel Talbot and Bostwick get approved? Because that's not infill. That's nothing but vacant land. And if infill is the goal, we have plenty of vacant buildings downtown that should be converted. Why not them? Now, I know the goal, and we keep hearing, the goal is to revitalize the downtown core. But we've heard that for 30 years. If revitalizing the downtown core was so vital, why hasn't it been done already? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. For other members of the public who would like to address the committee. So clerk, if there's anyone online. Oh. So yes, sir, I see you. Please go to the mic and give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Is that okay there?
That's great.
Okay. My name's Angus Johnson. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. Most recently, in the context of the Oxford developments, we raised a concern about the potential these developments have for significantly increasing transportation emissions by housing thousands more cars in the city. Our proposal today for council is to consider strategies that could, if adopted, actually work to reduce the number of new commuters being added to the city and also prevent a significant amount of increased emissions that new commuters could potentially create. To accomplish these objectives, the strategy would require new developments offering units for sale or rent to, 1, offer incentivized pricing of no parking units, and 2, protect or reserve parking for commuters within the London CSD for the rest of the units. So with regards to the developments under consideration today, our ask would be to delay final approval for these developments until it's clear that the pricing and parking policies align with these requirements. Number 1, in theory, intensification is supposed to reduce car dependency, encourage walkability, and actually reduce emissions accordingly. Instead, developments being approved are gateways for thousands of cars. To reduce the number of car commuters and instead attract buyers who are walkers, bikers, or transit riders, incentives are needed to encourage purchasing or renting no park units. The price reduction for no park units should at least reflect the removal of the amount that is included in the other units for the cost of parking. The federal government is offering millions of dollars in grants to support global warming mitigation strategies. Additional subsidies for renting or renting no park units would seem a very appropriate way to spend some of that money. The ratio of cheaper no parking units to more expensive units that include parking should be at a minimum of 1 to 3 to ensure a healthy complement of no park units. It's important to make them available in more than token amounts and to market them aggressively. As to number 2, protected parking, the most serious problem currently as of the 2021 census is with commute emissions created by commuters who live in London and commute to work to destinations outside of the city. This is what the breakdown of commutes for the London CD looks like. You can see that on my print copy. This shows London from left to right, commutes within London to all the surrounding 7 CSDs to areas out the CD in the total. And again, I'll leave you to look at that. The out group, although smaller, 39,000 to 114,000, is uncomfortably close to producing the same amount of emissions as that cohort that commutes within the city. Our calculation is there, and I'm not going to take your time to look at it now. Please look at it at your leisure. The point of the calculation is that comparing the total of these groups, within the city there's approximately 1,700,000 minutes of emissions to out emissions of 1,873,000 daily, which means that 26% of the total commuters are producing at least the same amount of emissions as the in. In short, commute out cars are producing conservatively 3 times the emissions of cars commuting within the city. The point of reserving the sale of parking for commuters who work within the city is to protect parking for these shorter commutes and prevent the number of longer commutes from growing. In practice, it would be a matter of requiring that buyers who are buying parking for units show proof that they work within the London CSD before they can make the purchase of the parking. So, for example, in the context of the ESAM development, which could embrace another 6,000 cars, assuming the same demographics, 1,560 of those commuters would be expected to buy a base for traveling out of the city to work. If this pricing policy was in place, they'd be looking for parking somewhere else. A motto suggestion for this commute emissions reduction strategy might be, live, work, and walk in affordable London. That's my 2 cents worth. I just want to take a moment here to thank all of you for being here at this time of year. My family right now, my younger son's in France and my daughter's in Italy and my other son's up at the cottage at Sausage Lake. And my wife is beating my chops back home saying, why are you down at City Hall when we should be out there too? And I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are in the same position with your significant others. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll look for other speakers from the public. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Richard Orr, and I live at 565 Upper Queens, 2 doors from this proposed development. Our family has lived at this site since 1958, so we've been there well over 60 years. I have a question for you that I'd like you to answer. I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I want you to tell me, as representatives of the city, yourself, what the answer is. If the zoning for the subject properties is amended from R1 to R5, which will provide a much higher density in the area, of course, this will be a downgrade for adjacent property owners, a number of whom have lived on Upper Queen Street for anywhere from 50 to 60 years. In our case, more than 60 years. My question is, what amount of municipal tax reduction can adjacent homeowners expect to receive from the city as a result of the downgrading of this area, where 2 residential homes once were and now are being proposed to be occupied by 28 units? That's my first question. Secondly, I'd just like to let you know that I know the front door from the back door of any unit. And I say that having worked in 3 architectural firms, both in London and in the city of Windsor, for over 46 years. The site concept plan that's been submitted actually shows those units which face closest to Upper Queen Street. It shows that the rear door, the rear entrance, is going to be facing Upper Queen. Now, I'd like each of you on council to just think of this for a moment. If you looked out your front door and you saw a development going into your community across the road from you, and the rear entrance was being proposed to face the street, what would you think? Would you appreciate that? Not likely. Well, that's what's being proposed here. If you look on the site concept plan, that's what is being proposed. And I think that you need to take a long, hard look at this proposal. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. I'll look for any other speakers that would like to address the committee on this topic. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. Seeing none, I don't see any further speakers. So I'll look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. There was one question raised regarding property tax assessment on values of property. I just want to see if there's anyone from finance that could kind of speak to, just kind of give a indication of, tax assessments and that. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm just going to interject here because I don't think that it's within staff's purview to comment on how MPAC assesses property values. Property values are not actually assessed by the City of London. They're assessed by a provincial body, the Provincial Property Tax Assessment Corporation. And so that is really outside of both our scope and of staff scope.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's actually what I was hoping to hear from staff. because I just wanted to be, the question answered, that property assessments are done from a provincial body, not from the city. Okay, I'll put this item on the floor. Oh, just a second, please. Thank you. Before we go on, the clerk reminded me, and wasn't audible to me, there was a question about asbestos in the building, so I wonder if staff could comment on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe that would be a question for the applicant. However, that would be a matter dealt with at demolition of the building.
Okay, so that would be covered off when the demolition permit comes forward?
Again, I believe it's a question for the applicant, but that would be my understanding. It would be dealt with at the time of the demolition.
All right, I'll go to the applicant on that, if they could comment on how you're going to handle the asbestos if found in that building.
In the building, and as Heather mentioned, that's not something that we would typically deal with at this stage. That would be done through the demolition permit process. If there was any special program that would be required for asbestos mitigation, our client would undergo that program. It's a very serious issue, and that would be dealt with appropriately through that process.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll put the item on the floor for committee members. Councillor Pelosa, welcome to the committee. I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me as the ward councillor for this application and a visiting member to your committee. I do have one question, if I can, through you to the applicant. Just looking for confirmation that units are going to be for sale. I know people can buy them and then rent them out, but just they'd be for sale. I believe I saw that in the report. And also looking for your proposed construction timeline.
Okay, I'll go to the applicant.
Thank you. Through the chair. The question was the units for sale. So that hasn't been determined, but I can say that our client is looking through, going through the condominium process. That would be a vacant land condominium. We are in the early stages of that. That would come after zoning, usually in concert with the site plan process. In terms of timing, our client would like to move forward with this as soon as possible. Because we're coming up at the tail end of construction season, they would likely be looking to break ground in the spring.
Council.
Sorry, spring 2025, 2026?
2025.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll move into general comments and some questions for staff then. For residents, in conversations with you and within the reports of your comments, I do believe that one of the two homes coming down is definitely an iconic neighborhood home in a jeweled neighborhood, but staff have noted that it's not on the heritage list and has no found cultural significance that would prevent this development. As per the proposed timelines, also a resident in the area myself, and aware of another construction project that was already approved on Upper Queen Street as we went through this together not too long ago. That one also has a proposed spring 2025 start line for construction. So just letting residents know that as we move through this, if approved, I'll be working with both applicants to let them know of what each other are up to, as they are somewhat close together in a really small stretch between Chiddington and commissioners. My question to staff, realizing this proposed application only has an open space of 40%, and as noted on page 38 and 39 of this report, talking about sewer capacities and overland water, this area on multiple sides of Highland Country Club received flooding and sewer backups in the recent water events. Myself and other residents I've been out meeting with amongst those, looking for confirmation of how that be mitigated through this process, realizing we can't tie into Chiddington and Upper Queen needs to be extended, and any overland water will need to pass through this site, highlighting concerns from current residents of what they're experiencing, and as we would potentially welcome 28 new residents to the neighborhood, of them potentially becoming flooded themselves if they move into this area.
I'll go to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair. As part of that future site plan engineering design, stormwater will be contained and controlled on-site, and directed underground and overland to Upper Queens Ave. So we have engineering standards that will be in place as part of that review. And we'll use a combination of lock grading, storage on-site through the parking areas. All that will be maintained to pre-development levels. So through that review, we'll ensure that there's no negative impacts to the adjacent properties and that they're following our engineering standards.
Councillor.
Thank you. And just on page 39, seeing the conveyance of overland flows from external sources and the storm drainage servicing reports, the proper stormwater management practices. How will this be addressed when the area already seems to have a problem with overland coming? I'm not sure if part of this would circle back to stormwater management that's already in the area, or I know the storm we got was a 1%, less than 1% chance coming from Ms. Ramalou. I did read the reports and appreciate where we're at, but this area, even with residents taking up the city's sewer mitigation and other levels, did seem to have a high rate of issues of just how can we make sure that we fix it while moving forward with new development? Like what can be done in addition to just they need to do a report? Thank you.
I'll go to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, so yes, we do recognize that there was a significant overland flow issue during the last 250-year storm that we experienced just a few weeks ago, and there were a number of properties flooded in the area because of this. However, I would say that, yes, you're right, those flows were external to this site. We don't actually believe that this application and the work going on this site will contribute to that. That said, we also, although this site will have to deal with any external flows that are already naturally directed through their site as part of their stormwater mitigation, and that does include some flow from the golf course based on the topography. This site, they won't be able to fix the entire area, of course, so that would be a separate issue for us to study with stormwater engineering and see if there are other external works that we may take on as a city.
Councillor.
Thank you to staff for those comments. And just for residents, and certainly the applicant would now be well aware of the other issues that, regardless if they do condos sold or whatnot. Just a thank you to staff of the current residents, as you've seen their comments within these reports too, once the water event occurred, that still working with staff and working towards a fall ward town hall type meeting focused around flooding and stormwater management and mitigation efforts with staff, just to make sure that residents can have access to this information. As current residents, I know their questions will pertain to this development application and questions too, even in person as we move into the fall. So thank you for that. And I will continue with work through with residents should this application move forward for any traffic mitigation and water and other concerns within the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for other committee members. Councillor Rahman.
Thanks. I'll put the staff recommendation on the floor, and I do have a question.
Okay, I have a seconder. Deputy Mayor Lewis seconds. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. And my question's for the applicant, and I just wanted, if it's possible, to comment on, you mentioned that during the consultation period, there were some valuable feedback from residents and that was incorporated into the final design. I'm just wondering if you can comment on that further.
I'll go to the applicant.
Sure. Through the chair, thank you very much for the question. The feedback that we got through the public consultation process back in February was related to the interface of the units with the neighbors to the north and the south, so the interior side lot lines. We had some commentary from the golf club, which they were just asking for a little bit of an increased setback, which we accommodated, as well as there was commentary regarding the actual design of the buildings. So I can tell you that we increased the distance from the building to the lot line and provided some visuals for what the treatment of that area is going to be. So in all of the developments that our firm works on, we encourage our clients to put up privacy fencing, at a minimum 6-foot board-on-board fence. In some cases, our clients are successful in doing higher than that, as well as robust landscaping on the inside of the fence, so on the client's property. So that provides a very strong visual barrier, as well as a nice landscaped interface between the two properties. There was a change change in terms of the aesthetics of the building itself. The previous version was a very modern-looking building, which the commentary was, well, this doesn't really fit in the neighborhood, and quite frankly, we tended to agree with that. The property then changed hands. One of the partners exited, and the current developer took that feedback and said, okay, well, let's look at something different here, and that's why we have the more contemporary look that you see in front of you today.
Counselor?
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I appreciate the comments from Councillor Pelosa. I shared the same concerns around the issues related to flooding in the area, and I see that repeated in the comments from residents in the area, so do have some grave concerns about that. But I do understand that this is reflected in the report and that it will be mitigated through the site plan.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to 3.3, this is regarding 455 Highbury Avenue North. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Rahman moves it, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions for staff? Councillor, any members? Seeing then I'll go to the applicant if they're here. I'd like to address the committee.
The applicant's
Online.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can. Please give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Sure, thank you, and through you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Taylor Whitney, Intermediate Planner with Zelenka Priama Limited, the planning consultant representing the landowner of 455 Highbury Avenue North. I do apologize for not being able to be there in person today, but we have a COVID positive household, so I figured that this would be the most appropriate format. I am here today to respectfully request that this committee grant a deferral of this application. Following the release of the staff report last week, we had reached out to staff to request this deferral. However, they advised that there was insufficient time to circulate a notice of cancellation of public meeting and advised that we would have to make this deferral request here in front of you today. The staff report was released less than a week ago, and due to summer vacation schedules and other conflicts, we have not had the opportunity to have a fulsome discussion with the landowner relating to staff's recommendation for refusal. As such, we would appreciate the opportunity to review the staff report in more detail with our client in order to gauge whether there is any opportunity to make changes which could better align with city staff's position on this application. It's our opinion that there is no harm in granting this deferral, considering there has been no public interest to date with respect to this application. And while a deferral is our preferred approach, procedurally, if this committee is not willing to grant the deferral, I would respectfully request to have an opportunity to comment on the merits of this application through this forum. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. I'll look for any members of the public who would like to address the committee. Mr. Clerk, if there's anyone online. I don't see anyone here in chambers, so I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion.
So we have a recommendation from staff for refusal on this. I'll put this on the floor for committee. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. Before moving forward with either the staff recommendation or a referral, I just wanted to ask staff or the clerk to comment on the process and if there's any issue with a referral.
Okay, I'll go to staff for their comments on a referral option.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Until just now, we were unsure of the reasoning or rationale for the referral back to staff. And it's unclear to us what changes the applicant would be proposing to better align with the London Plan policy framework. So it's difficult to know whether a referral back to staff would be productive. It also would depend on the meeting which the applicant would be seeking to defer to. If we were to go to September 10th, we are right up against our timelines for a report deadline, and so it doesn't leave much time for meaningful discussion. So that would be my commentary.
Councillor?
Okay, some things to ponder then. I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee on where we should go.
Okay, I'll look to Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Well, if we are debating the merits of this application, then I do have lots of questions regarding the tree protection bylaw and the trees on this location. And I'm not sure if that would require an in-camera discussion or if I'm able just to ask them on the floor.
I'll go to, I'm not sure who to ask. I'll just go to staff and see if that requires in-camera discussion or if we're even at that point yet.
Through the chair, could we have a little bit more clarification in terms of what you mean by in terms of the tree protection? Thank you.
Councillor?
Sure, happy to. Based on the report, it's my understanding that trees had already been cut down in the TPA site, the tree protection area site. And I'm just wondering the process for that, if there have been any penalties, if that goes against a process, and what that's looking like between staff and I guess the applicant as to the allowability of having those removed.
Go to staff.
Through the chair, it's a technical question with our forestry team. If applicable, if we could have those answers for you for council.
Councillor?
Sure, yeah, I think that they would heavily weigh on my decision-making ability at this point, so not having them at this point would be difficult for me to be able to make a decision on this file. But I understand if you don't have those answers available.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I too have a number of questions about this, and I'm not sure where the deferral, given the report deadlines, would get us. But I think that there's a number of questions that several of us have with respect to different components, perhaps even of the application, whether that be the removal of the special provision, whether it be the tree protection area considerations. I will say that the applicant, in terms of revitalizing an old building and making it look much more appealing from a street perspective, has been great. This is at Highbury and Bridges. I cannot come to City Hall without passing this building every day, so I would say that they've done a good job in terms of revitalizing. But this extra component, recognizing that the original proposal was to be fully self-contained, I think we all have some questions, and we may have a variety of ways that we need to approach staff or have a discussion with the applicant as well for some more understanding. So I am going to suggest that this be referred to the council meeting without a recommendation from the planning committee, and give us an opportunity to ask some questions before this reaches the council meeting for a decision. And then should a referral be necessary at the council meeting, then that can still proceed, but that may give us some time. Now, I'm not sure, and through you, Chair, I would like to ask our staff what they would need from direction for us leading up to a council meeting if we wanted a couple of options available to us, because I know that, you know, there may be bylaw changes or things like that that have to be adapted. So I'm just wondering through you, Chair, if staff can comment, if we forward this with no decision, do you need any additional direction from us at this time that would still allow you to meet statutory deadlines? And I'm also concerned about a deferral with regard to our 90-day decision periods and the fact that we are not supposed to be deferring applications. We have a 90-day obligation for a decision. So looking if staff can give shed a little bit more light on What if we just forward this to council and take a little more time to get some more information?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, so the current recommendation from staff is refusal. There's no bylaw attached to it so that would be prepared if there's going to be discussion and consideration of approval of the requested amendment. We are happy to field questions in this form right now for anything that can be addressed. I will note just on the tree protection as well, some additional information that the city did grant permits for the cutting conditional on the replanting of the trees, which has not yet happened. Any discussion about implementing the tree protection bylaw and any follow-up action or course correction would be a matter that would have to be discussed in camera with legal.
I just advise the deputy mayor, the applicant has her hand raised, so I don't know if you want to hear from her first or continue on.
Through you, Chair, if the applicant wants to offer a comment on the potential of just sending it to council without a recommendation, I'm happy to hear their thoughts as well. For me, if I can just preface this a little bit, for the applicant's sake, I'm not sure what has changed in terms of a self-storage unit that was contained within the existing building to now requiring self-storage exterior to the existing building. I was fine with it inside, but adding additional coverage and exterior units as well. I'm not sure why, with the existing building already in place, why we're seeking some addition now. So that, if the applicant wants to comment on that as well, I'd appreciate that.
Ms. Whitney, over to you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. If I may provide some background information, as the Deputy Mayor has correctly suggested, in April of last year, Council approved a zoning bylaw amendment which permitted the self-storage use in the existing building on the subject lands. And this application seeks to permit the expansion. Last year, when we made this request for the self-storage use within the existing building, a tree protection overlay applied to the southerly portion of the lands, which recognized an existing wooded area. However, the wooded area has since been removed to address vagrancy issues on the lands. The client retained a landscape consultant and obtained all necessary permits and approvals from the city prior to removing the majority of the trees. And we've reached out to the city on several occasions to discuss the replanting strategy, and those conversations are in progress. Now that that area is generally clear, it now provides an opportunity to the client to consider utilizing the remaining area of the site.
Deputy Mayor.
So through you then, Chair, I guess a follow-up for the applicant to comment on. If you're utilizing this area, then where do you see the tree replanting, the compensation for the trees that were removed being replaced? Because from the site plan, it looks like this really eliminates any area for replanting that's required for the trees that were removed.
I'll go to the applicant.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, that is a good question. Through consultation with the landscape consultant, we've provided several meters of applicable landscape area along the frontages, along the southerly boundary and the westerly and the easterly to accommodate the required replanting. We've confirmed that it would provide enough area for the replanting requirements through the tree removals and also any additional replantings to help screen the buildings.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I don't know if we have any forestry staff who are able to comment on the replacement trees as well, who are with us at the meeting. I'm seeing some staff shaking their heads that we don't. So that's, I appreciate the applicant thinks that they can accommodate it. I would like to hear from our staff if they feel that they can accommodate it as well. I don't have any further comment to offer. I'm not prepared to approve it, but I'm not sure that refusal is necessarily necessary either, so I'm not sure how the rest of the committee feels.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Frank and then Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. Yes, perhaps a question from you to the applicant. Was it correct in my hearing that the trees were removed because there are people using that wooded area, whether they're experiencing homelessness or accessing it for other reasons? Is that the primary reason that the trees are cut down?
Ms. Whitney?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. That would be correct, yes. And with self-storage being a particular use that requires security, it was an issue. We had multiple conversations, including the ward councillor and London Police, about the issues on the lands, particularly involving multiple repeated break-ins into the existing building.
Councillor?
Thank you. And could you tell me a little bit about your ability to secure your property using fencing and other methods?
Ms. Whitney?
Thank you, and through you. There is an existing driveway from Bridges Street that would be utilized. My understanding is that there would be a gate and perhaps a security building to allow vehicles in and out, and there would be fencing surrounding the lands. Generally, those types of details would be refined through the site plan approval process, so I don't have a fulsome answer for you, but that is the vision as of right now.
Councillor?
Thank you. And sorry, I don't think I was clear. Is there existing fencing that completely secures this location right now?
Ms. Whitney?
Yes, there is.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was just worried that we're cutting down trees that were perfectly fine and healthy for reasons that could be properly secured through other built infrastructure methods. I'm actually prepared to put the staff recommendation on the floor to refuse this. I don't personally like the approach that has been taken at this point, and given that the requested reasons for approving this location don't even meet the provincial policy statement and other reasons that staff have outlined, I'm happy to put the staff recommendation on the floor to refuse.
Okay, we have a motion moved. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Rahman?
Thank you. Yes, I'll second, and if I can provide comment.
Okay, so we have a motion moved and second, and I'll go to you, Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate the dialogue here at committee. I think it's been helpful just to clarify some of the concerns. I think under Part B of the refusal, Part 3, the proposed development and requested zoning represents a negative impact to the subject lands. We do not want large storage facilities as gateway markers to the City of London. That's not something that we're looking to do, and I appreciate the fact that staff looked at it from that lens. When we're looking at facilities like this, I think the expansion of it would be detrimental to the community around it. So I'm not in support and support the refusal.
Okay, I'll look for other comments or questions from committee members or visiting councillors. Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to go with the staff recommendation. Moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3.4 regarding 4452. I'll look for a motion to open the PBM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions at this time? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant. If the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Allen. I'm with MHBC, Planning. We are acting on behalf of the registered owner and the applicant. At this time, Mr. Chair, we'd like to express our support for the staff recommendation, which effectively would establish the western portion of the property, subject property that is, to be commercial in nature and marginally increase the eastern portion of the property for light industrial purposes. At this time, Mr. Chair, I'd also like to advise that our client is actively pursuing a site plan approval application or site plan approval for the eastern portion of the property for truck transport terminals. That application was brought before the council, I believe, 1 or 2 years ago. I'd also like to thank City Planning and City Ecology for their assistance and attention to this application. We're gladly available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for any members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item. Please, sir, I apologize. I'm going to have to ask for your name again. My notes are on another page, and then you have 5 minutes.
My name is Angus Johnson, and thank you, Chair, through you to the committee. My comment on this property I've entitled Insignificant Trees, and I'm having trouble the idea of cutting down apparently hybrid butternuts because they're not significant. Any trees growing in this particular area have to be significant. I'd say they're about the only thing around here that's worth saving unless there's something significant about acres and acres of useless pavement. How you could describe this whole area of the city as vibrant is beyond my imagination. Norway maples can process emissions, shade our houses, and do a lot of other things that are very, very good. And I have concerns with the attitude that if something is non-native and that it doesn't have a purpose and shouldn't be part of our canopy. I have a couple of mature trees growing in my yard that have been grown 30 feet in 15 years, and even the experts can't figure out what name to put on them. I read we should be studying Washington, D.C. to figure out what to plant here, because that's where our environment is heading. But you don't need to be an expert to see that cutting mature trees of any kind and planning to replace them somewhere else with saplings when they're already lined up by thousands looking for homes, it's just not a good idea. Maybe not a significant idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Look for any others that would like to address the committee. I'll ask the chair if there's anyone online. There's no one online, and seeing no one else in the chambers, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Robbins, seconded by Councillor Frank, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll put this item on the floor for members. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Through you, Chair, I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Hillier has seconded. We have a motion moved and seconded. Sorry, Councillor?
Sorry. Yes, I had a question as well.
Yep, okay. I'll go to you right now.
Thank you very much. Just regarding access and exiting of this property, regarding the Part C, can I get confirmation that access to this property will be off of Castleton and not Dingman?
I'll go to staff on that.
Through the chair, that is correct. The access will be off Castlegard.
Councillor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll go to committee for any other comments or questions. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. My questions are mostly about the woodlot and the wetland. I know that the EIS indicated that it was not significant, but I am just wondering, because it did include that 1 to 2 species of frogs and toads have been recorded. And I'm just wondering if all the trees are removed, and then I know essentially double the amount of trees will be planted nearby. Is there any opportunity for any kind of wetland feature for those amphibians to be able to move to in this process?
I'll go to staff.
Thank you, and through the chair. During the EIS, one frog was heard calling from the trees. We are of the opinion that the habitat can be replaced in the compensation area, where the trees will be replaced and planted along the north, east, and south side. No actual natural habitat is being removed regarding the wetland, but there will be habitat on site for the frog.
Councillor.
Thank you. And if I may, could you explain a little bit about, because I understand, again, like the trees are being replanted, but my understanding is, so are the frogs living in the trees or in the wetland feature, if that is information you have available to you?
I'll go staff.
Thank you, and through the chair. I don't have information where the frog is actually living, as it wasn't actually seen. It was just heard during the site visit. Again, the wetland itself is deemed non-significant, so therefore it is allowed to be removed, and we are confident that the habitat can be replaced in the compensation tree area.
Councillor.
Thank you. And one last question. Would we at this point have a list of the tree species that are being replanted? I'm just wondering, given that we're removing hybrid butternut and catalpa, if those are on the replanting list, if we have that information.
I'll go staff.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. At this moment, the exact details of the trees to be planted have not been determined. They will be determined through the site plan process, but generally speaking, the majority of trees that are proposed to be removed are invasive or non-native species, and they will be replaced with native tree species.
Councillor.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. And thanks for talking about the frogs so much.
I'll look for any other comments or questions. We have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3.5 regarding 757 Southdale Road East. I'll look for motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank moves it, seconded by Councillor Rahman. I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions from committee members? Seeing none, I'll go to the applicant. The applicant is here. Please repeat your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hello again, committee. My name is Matt Campbell, partner with Zelenka Priamo. Again, we're excited to have this in front of Planning Committee today. Just in a nutshell, this is a bit of a story about something that happened 40 years ago that we're trying to make right. So this property is owned by Dr. Jerry Kozlak. He's a chiropractor, and he is looking to wind down his business and wanted to ensure his property was completely compliant with the zoning bylaw. So he gave us a call. We found, oh, this property actually isn't compliant with the zoning bylaw, and the reason is because when he purchased this property 40 years ago, he lived in the property, then subsequently moved out of the property while operating his business there. So at the time, 40 years ago, that was a an accessory use. Since he moved out and there's no residential use in this property anymore, it is essentially illegal, non-compliant with the zoning bylaw. Jerry still operates out of that building. It's a going concern. It's entrenched in the community, and we want to continue that. And hopefully, we have another chiropractor that's going to be taking over that practice. So this application is essentially to recognize an existing use. Simply because the zoning bylaw never recognized that specific use, and neither does the London plan. So that's why we have an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment in front of you today. Again, this property has been in existence more or less in this condition for longer than I've been alive. And has been, a great use in the community. And we certainly we thank staff for their assistance with this application. And we're hopeful that that committee will find a way to recommend approval to council for this. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item? I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. No. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman. We'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Councilor Robin.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. And we've got a seconder from Councilor Frank. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to 3.6. This is regarding 267 York Street. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councilor Rahman, seconded by Councilor Frank. I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions from committee members? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant. I'd like to address. I see Ms. Whitney. Assume you're representing the applicant. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Taylor Whitney, intermediate planner with Zelenka Priama Limited, the planning consultant representing City Plaza London Inc., the landowner of 267 York Street. We're very excited to be here today with this application. I would like to thank staff for their work and collaboration on this project to date, and appreciate and agree with their recommendation for approval. Thank you for your consideration, and I am available and happy to answer any questions you may have about this application.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for any members of the public that would like to address the committee. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. Seeing no one in the gallery, and I'll look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councilor Rahman, seconded by Councilor Frank, will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll put this item on the floor for committee members. Councilor Rahman.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'll move the staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a mover. I'll look for a seconder. Councilor Frank is seconded. I'll put that, we have motion moved in second, so I'll look for comments or questions. Councilor Frank.
Thank you. First off, I just want to say thank you for including some of the sustainability aspects within the site plan approval so that we don't have to add them in here, so I appreciate that. I also wanted to say to the consultant, I'm sorry you're sick. I meant to say that earlier. I hope you're feeling better and your family's feeling better soon. I did one question through the chair to staff just regarding the sanitary and the sewer system. We had a little discussion at Civic Works, but I was hoping to hear a little bit more about this file and how we can move forward with making sure it has sufficient capacity.
Yeah, this is a substantial development, so we'll go to staff to hear about commenting on the sewer capacity for this project.
Thank you. Through the chair. The city is undertaking some sanitary sewer infrastructure improvements intended to be completed by the end of 2025. This will open up a limited amount of capacity at the time for the downtown area, which this site is located within. So that's the first step. And then the second step is part of the 2028 DC bylaw update. There's going to be further discussions regarding infrastructure upgrades in the downtown and these transit village areas, built areas. So we're progressing towards some future projects, and 2025 will be the start of it.
Councilor.
Thank you. Glad to hear that. I'm always happy to see surface parking lots being turned into housing, especially ones that go right along our rapid transit route. So appreciate everyone's work on this one. I'll be supporting it.
Go to Councilor Ferreira. If there's any other committee members like to jump in first, Councilor Ferreira, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for recognizing me as not a member of the committee. Councillor Frank asked some of the questions that I was going to go around with the capacity issues, but I do echo what she said. I guess I'll just expand a little bit on the capacity. So I wanted to make some clarifications from just kind of what we've seen in the discussion. The applicant approached us, a long time ago, approached me. I had at least 1 or 2 meetings on this with the applicant and several meetings with staff on the infrastructure component when it comes to the sanitary system. And I guess I'll just kind of narrow in onto the trunk work that we're doing, the sewer trunk work at the forks of the Thames. From what I understand, that will increase the capacity by about 17,000 units. And this application is about 1,067 units, which leaves us with the remainder of about 16,000 units for more and new development downtown. So I just want to go to staff, clarify that before I continue.
I'll go to staff.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So yes, that is correct. So the work that we're undertaking to upsize the trunk sewer that goes underneath the forks of the Thames, we estimate it will add about 17,000 units worth of capacity once it's completed. So it's currently in design phase and is scheduled for construction in 2025 and is a high priority for staff.
Councillor.
Thank you. And also, this is a very significant application. Like, we got a lot of units there, 2 big towers. And with the extra capacity that we still have after that the sewer trunk work, we have pretty good runway for developments coming in the future too. So we're open for business in that aspect. So I wanted to clarify on that too. Again, I guess I'll keep it really short. I really like the reuse of, that concrete just island just in the middle. Reusing the surface parking lot is very good. This is a space in the city, in the downtown area, that's not necessarily utilized to the max potential. So this is definitely going to bring that new use. It's going to bring new life to that area of downtown. I'm very supportive of that. I will be supporting it at council when I'm able to vote on it. So thank you to the applicant. Thank you to staff. Thank you to Councillor Frank for stealing my questions, and I'm done there. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members or visiting councillors? If the committee will allow me, I'll just make a quick comment. This is, again, another development along the Wellington Gateway, so very, very exciting that we're starting to see these developments come along. Remember the discussion on that particular leg of the rapid transit, and we're finally seeing more and more intensification. And what was the idea behind transit along this route? We're changing the skyline of London. We're a big city. We're a city will be hitting 500,000, no doubt, in the near future. And the skyline is reflecting that. And just an anecdotal comment is that we had recently hosted the Ontario Summer Games, and the medals that were provided for the athletes, a really neat feature. Of course, they showed trees because we're the forest city, but for the first time I saw building, and I heard the designer interviewed on TV, and the reference was there to a skyline. And I hadn't heard that comment made for London. I had never heard that comment made for London. We now will have a skyline, and we see it every day. I see it when I go to the ballpark to watch London Majors over right field and left field. And this is another great example of bringing proper intensification to the downtown, to the core, which I think we all like to see, because it'll multiple good news. People work, live, and play right where they, right in one area to cut down on transit, actually, but also give the ability to whip to the north or the south end for the retail down there along the route. So very exciting. Any other comments or questions before I call the vote? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 3.7, 1368 Oxford Street East. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. We'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions at this time? Seeing none, I'll look to see if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hello again, members of committee. My name is Dan Murphy, urban planner with Civic Planning and Design. Today representing our client, Dr. Ashish Kumar Patel, the owner of the property at 1368 Oxford Street East. This property was recently purchased by our client with their primary goal being to establish their own dental practice within the existing building while maintaining the residential permissions for the existing dwelling units in the basement. This proposal seeks to add the office conversion zone category to the site, which would allow for the conversion of residential space to a medical dental use, providing desirable and convenient medical uses on a highly accessible site along Oxford Street East in close proximity to Fanshawe College. It is also the intent of our client to improve the existing site condition by removing redundant driveway accesses, improving the existing substandard parking situation by providing an updated bicycle and vehicle parking area, in addition to increased landscaping, all of which will be addressed through the site plan control process. No significant alterations to the exterior of the existing building are contemplated as part of this proposal. Lastly, I want to thank Michaela Hines and the rest of Planning and Development staff for their work on this proposal. We're in full agreement with the staff recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll look for any members of the public who would like to address the committee. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. Okay, seeing no one in chambers and no one online, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. Call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll put the item on the floor for committee members. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I'll put the staff recommendation on the floor.
Can I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis seconds. Any comments or questions? I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to 3.8. This is regarding 539 and 543 Topping Lane. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman, and we'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant if you'd like to address the committee. Please, sir, go ahead. Give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Mike Davis here, a partner with Civic Planning and Design here in London. Here today on behalf of our client, South London Investments, a group of builders who are the owner and developer of this project at 539 and 543 Topping Lane. Firstly, just want to acknowledge the work of your planning staff in their thoughtful evaluation of this proposal, their work with us, and ultimately bringing it forward today. Through this process, I want to let you know we did undertake a public consultation and communication strategy. I think in this case, you know, we did not reach a consensus, I would say, with surrounding neighbors, but we did work really hard to provide quality information, ask for thoughts and opinions, and be transparent with residents about how we were making decisions through this process. Every project and site that we work on is unique, starts with an in-depth analysis by planners, engineers, and other technical specialists to determine what's possible or appropriate on a given site. Some of the key attributes that, in our opinion, lend itself to this specific form of development on this property. Firstly, we have direct frontage on Topping Lane, which is identified as a neighborhood connector street in your London plan. The site has the advantage of being a corner location. These two lots are surrounded by a larger block of cluster townhomes. And that really provides what we see as a logical boundary between lower forms of development to the west on Eaton Park Drive and stepping up towards Topping Lane. And then similarly, it's a barrier providing a stepping up point from along Topping Lane. So north you have lower forms of development, and then as you get closer to Commissioners, we have heights and densities increasing. Immediately across the street, we have a former school site zone for the development of 4-story apartment buildings at the southeast corner of Topping Lane and Eaton Park. We have a significant area designated for high-density residential uses, up to 14 stories. The site's also very well served by transit, close walking distance to commercial amenities. There are a number of points. We've obviously spent considerable time reviewing the public feedback. I just want to proactively touch on a few of those points. for the benefit of residents and also members of this committee. One of the key themes is around the zoning and how the proposal does not align with various standards contained in the R8 zone. The City of London zoning bylaw, frankly, is outdated. It was developed in the early 90s. The standards embedded within those zones tie back to a previous planning paradigm and don't really reflect contemporary development trends or expectations for these infill projects. So with almost every infill project you see through this committee, there are a package of variances required. I know this council has initiated the Rethink Zoning exercise, so hopefully at some point we get to a place where that's no longer the case. But until this time, this approach is quite common. The city's independent professional planners have agreed with the variances that we have proposed here and worked with them on. Noticing a number of concerns about traffic, we did have a traffic impact assessment prepared as part of this project. This development will generate 20 trips in the AM peak hour, 22 trips in the PM peak hour. We've confirmed with transportation staff that both Eaton Park and Topping Lane are operating significantly below their intended design capacity. So the volumes on those roads are below 50% and 30% of the design capacity. The intersection of Eaton Park and Topping Lane was analyzed carefully, and there's no traffic control improvements warranted there. The stop control will continue to be sufficient for this volume of traffic. Lastly, there's a concern about loss of trees and green space. As with most new infill developments, there of course will be an initial loss of trees. However, 8 existing trees are able to be maintained, preserved as part of this development. That is significant in the context of a new infill development. There's going to be a row of trees along Eaton Park Drive that are preserved and a row of 5 trees along the north property boundary that will be preserved along with 2 hedges. I think it's also important to note that whether this site is developed as proposed or whether it's redeveloped under the existing R19 zoning, there will be impact to trees and a comparable impact to trees would happen in any scenario. I'll conclude my comments at that. Of course, I'm going to be available to answer questions. Appreciate your consideration of this application today.
Thank you. Okay, I'll look for members of the public that like to address the committee. Please give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Benke. I live in a townhouse on Topping Lane in the Berkshire Village. I represent more than 60 residents of Topping Lane, Eaton Park, and Westmoreland Road who signed this petition and/or made written submissions to the planner's office objecting to the variances. Note that we are not objecting to the proposed zone change from R1 to R8. We understand the need for housing in our city, and we were ready to welcome new neighbors. We fully expected more townhomes might be built. We only object to all the variances in height and setbacks that will result in a density of 188 units per hectare, which is equivalent to Zone 10. Having read the staff report, we are outraged, frustrated, and saddened at what our neighborhood will look like a year or 2 from now. But we still want to trust this process. We trust the PEC members to represent us, the residents of all the neighborhoods, and we still believe your loyalty lies with us. We have recently discovered that South London Investments Inc. is located in Markham. Their directors live in Mississauga. Civic Planning are newly installed on Richmond Street. It doesn't feel like they have a stake in our neighborhoods and will use their money and creative talents to truly enhance our city. We feel manipulated by them. On February 29th, Civic invited us to a meeting where they were vague about their intentions and dismissed our concerns. They told us they had not decided what they were going to build, leaving us no course of action but to wait and see. So at the second online meeting in May, the 21st, they showed us 4 stories with 55 units for the first time. But we know that they submitted plans in January that showed 4 stories with 46 units and 47 parking spaces. It seems that they misled us to make sure that by the time we knew what there was really planned, we had only 1 month left to submit our concerns to city councilors. They told us to just ask City Hall for parking restrictions if their 55 tenants cause a parking problem. So should we all give up our limited on-street parking privileges because they didn't provide sufficient parking for their tenants? They told us they had no obligation at all to preserve any of the 30 mature trees, because I guess they knew that they would have the option of paying a mere $350 for each tree they didn't replace, and that's on page 204. Are we to remain the forest city or not? Much of the city planner's recommendations to the PEC, starting on page 177, are copied verbatim from the civic design brief posted on their website. There are some additional recommendations by staff, but we have no reason to believe that they will be implemented. They seem to be optional. Please consider our email submissions beginning on page 208. We put many hours into this effort. With no prior experience or expertise, we analyzed the developer's proposal. We read the London plan and the London zoning bylaws. We attended our councillor's town hall. We went door to door to make sure our neighbors were well informed about the proposal. We are a stronger community now for having gone through this together. But then we attempted to understand how this proposed building could possibly be considered sensitive to, compatible with, and a good fit within the existing neighborhood context, to quote the London Plan 953. If the burden of proof is now on city staff, then we believe they failed. This specific policy area is not unique. Every neighborhood in the city has corners where a neighborhood street meets a neighborhood connector. Do you really want to set this precedent, allowing 4-story apartment buildings at the sidewalk or near the sidewalk throughout our neighborhoods? Civic calls it creating a more urban condition. What are we doing urbanizing random properties in our suburbs?
30 seconds.
Do you want one of these buildings on your block? How do you propose to stop them after you let them build one on mine? Thank you for your time and service to my fellow Londoners.
Thank you. Look for the next speaker. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Alex Crawford. I own a townhouse at Eaton Park Drive, and it's a wonderful place to live. I've used one of my vacation days from work to be here today, and instead of making memories with my family, I'm forced to come to City Hall to defend the neighborhood from a predatory developer. A developer that bought a house with developer that bought the house external to London. They're not even a London company. Next door to my 2-story townhouse are 2 bungalow houses. The developer wants to bulldoze the houses and all the trees and build a 4-story apartment with a 5th-story party balcony. This would be more than double the height of any house on the street. This building would block out the sunrise for me and 3 additional neighbors, casting us into darkness every morning. The building would also be pressed to the maximum extent possible up to the property line, creating a dark alley. Every time I barbecue on my deck, over 100 people will smell my cooking and be annoyed by my smoke. I'll be forced to listen to the noise generated by over 100 people every day and night. If my neighbor had a massive party with over 100 people and 45 vehicles parked in the backyard, I'd be entitled to phone the police and complain. However, this zoning amendment would make everyone in the neighborhood deal with that massive party every day and night forever. If these 2 bungalows were replaced with 20 townhouses that each had a garage, it would be a 10-fold increase in densification. And no one would have any problem with that. Densification needs to happen. The London plan needs to happen. But replacing 2 bungalows with a 4 or 5-story, depending how you look at it, apartment building is absurd. It's an insult to replace it on the street. This building would destroy the neighborhood's ability to use the roads and would be more than double the amount of commuters on the street. Having 45 people and only 45 units and only half those units having one person going to work every morning, I think that's an absurd point. Everyone has to go to work in the morning, except those few lucky ones that get to work from home. It's already very congested first thing in the morning and coming home at 4 o'clock. And visibility is quite poor as well. I'm not familiar with any study that has been quoted. The next municipal election is in 25 months. London voters need to know if their neighborhoods are safe from having a high-density apartment building put in the middle of their neighborhood. It would not be Topping Lane that gets all the traffic from this. It would be Eaton Park Drive, the side street that's a residential side street. So saying how the frontage is on Topping Lane, I don't know why that's relevant, since 100% of the people who would live in this building would have to come through Eaton Park Drive. Approving this development would set a precedent in London where Londoners have to live in fear that their neighborhoods will be destroyed and turned into dangerous slums with no protection. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker from the public. Please, sir. Give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miroslav Prysiak. I'm the close neighbor from Planet Developer, 551 Topping Lane across the street. I lived there for the past 30 years. Basically, when I recognized the plan for the 2 residential lots, 200 by 75, 2 of them, so basically 200 by 100 and 150, planning to do 55 units plus 46 parking lots. It's, in my opinion, this is so destructive and basically, I don't know how this is going to happen, how they're going to do that stuff, but definitely going to today meeting, I try to just back up from my property and get to the traffic. It takes me about 3 minutes because I cannot go because traffic is it's so high. So when I imagine other 50 cars and probably going to be twice that, I don't know how the people going to live over there, they're going to walk over there or something like that. And the company, just only one little thought, who did the research for the developer about the traffic, about other things. At the end of the all reports, they says they basically not sign up, not prove that, because during the life, the truth could be totally different. Not exactly what they said in the paper in the report. Nobody can imagine what kind of impact going to be there for the whole community. Definitely not good, just negative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll look for the next speaker. So clerk, if there's anyone online.
Rob Schultes, please.
Mr. Schultes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a resident on Topping Lane and the Middlesex Conduct Corporation 240 and a member of the board of directors. Thanks for listening to our concerns. Many of us have lived in the neighborhood for decades, and as long-term residents, it's only natural we're going to have strong emotional feelings towards changes. However, we're not opposed to intensification and the redevelopment of these lands, as we know how important the need for more housing is. We are here today because our concern is the size of the proposed development and its impact on the neighborhood. We're generally supportive of a low-rise apartment being constructed, especially if it's done so in accordance with the London Plan's recommendation for R8-4 zoning. The London Plan is touted as our city's official plan, a plan that was vetted through many stakeholders, a plan that survived an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and in the end, a plan that received provincial approval. In our last municipal election, most councillors supported that plan. The plan is supposed to guide growth and development in the city for 20 years. So this developer wants to make changes to the R8-4 zoning on the variances. But they would have bought that land knowing that the city plan would only allow for zoning of R8-4. The developer would likely also know before making an investment what building types would be allowed. So why would the developer propose the building of a property type that exceeds the parameters of height, density, and setbacks? The cynic would say it's because they know that it will just get approval. For us who have no experience in this process, it seems like the cards are stacked against us. As you read through the report, the rationale for approving the amendments is based almost entirely on the opinion of staff. Staff appears to be a planner whose opinion is reviewed by maybe a couple of more people in the department. That opinion and the amendments and the resulting development are consistent with the provincial policy in the London Plan. So please take a moment, though, to look at the visuals on pages 201 and 216. They show the monstrosity of this development and how compared to the neighboring buildings. Why would staff agree to push this building type to the edge of the sidewalk and let it tower over the existing buildings? The London Plan thoughtfully, through study and debate, set parameters that would not allow this to happen. Again, we're happy to have a 3-story apartment building set back in line with existing housing. We're not saying no to intensification. We're saying no to these amendments and to the variances. We understand there are housing targets as the city is trying to achieve, and they've done an impressive job this year, I might add. If this proposal is declined, what impact will 15 or 20 less units have on the overall total of the tens of thousands of new units that the city has already approved in the first half of this year? Minimal. But that construction of that property on Eaton Park and Topping Lane will have an impact for decades and decades to us. Yes, there's a potential for larger buildings across the road, but when? That land is sat vacant for decades. I've lived there for over 12 years. The city can't compel the development of that land. So it seems like a silly argument to make. Even if those taller buildings were built tomorrow, it doesn't justify changing the streetscape on our side of the neighborhood. The request by the developers to ask for amendments when the London Plan clearly outlines what can be built on that parcel of land is puzzling. The PEC is now tasked with making a decision. You're presented with a recommendation from staff, professionals, I know, educated and trained and experienced in planning and engineering. And those professionals might have some pressures to reach certain targets. So maybe, developers have a relationship with the planning department that we as residents can't have. It appears that developers, our relationship with the city is through the councillors. So we're asking the councillors to vote on their campaign of leadership and integrity. We also stand before the committee asking for our voices to not only be heard, but to feel that we've been listened to. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing decision. We ask the councillors who lead the committee to stand with the developer by approving the change to R84, but we also want them to stand with the residents by not approving the amendments to the variances. This decision would maintain a streetscape consistent with the existing streetscape by allowing a 3-story apartment to be built to a size that is not towering over its neighbors and of a density suitable for the neighborhood, while adding to the new number of housing units the city is targeting to achieve. Thank you, and we hope that you'll support us in our efforts.
Thank you. I'll look for another speaker from the public. Please, ma'am, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Janice Blosdale, and I have lived, thank you, in the area since 1975. When we moved in, I had a meadow behind me, and my children ran across to play with the little boy in the red brick house on Topping Lane. For all of those years, the 2 houses on Topping Lane have accessed Topping Lane with their driveways. Now, they're proposing to change the driveway to Eaton Park, and very close to a corner. I don't know when they checked their traffic, but I think it must have been close to midnight. They also propose cutting down all the mature trees there. If they would move their proposed apartment building or condos back to be in line with the condos that are presently there, they would save most of those trees on Topping Lane, and they could save the trees on Eaton Park, which would save almost all of the mature trees. And we do call ourselves the Forest City. I really think we should save mature trees. Lastly, the building as it is proposed has a number of condo units, but not as many parking spots as there are condo units. And I really feel that if you want to buy your groceries, you'd really like to have a car. And the grocery stores are not within walking distance, but the Salvation Army Church and the London Gospel Temple and a number of other churches are available to the people who will be living in that condo development or apartment development, and I think they might need them.
Thank you, ma'am. Look for any other speakers. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
I'm Eileen Driscoll. I live on Eaton Park Drive, 3 units down from the proposed building. I just have a couple of quick questions about parking. I don't quite understand the design of how the cars are going to be half under and half open in the parking lot. To me, that's going to be very noisy for us in the neighborhood. There'll be 46 cars, 47 cars. I'm not sure about the noise level. Secondly, I just wonder about the community care house that's on Topping Lane. They have wheelchair residents, and they are often on the streets, whether it's the sidewalk or the road, because of access to the sidewalk with their wheelchairs. So I just have those 2 questions about that kind of safety and noise. Thank you.
Thank you. And for another speaker, I'll ask the clerk if there's others online. Okay, I don't see anyone else standing to look to address us, so I'll look to committee for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councilor Frank, seconded by Deputy Mayor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so I'll put this on the floor. For committee members, I'll go to Councilor Frank.
Thank you. And through the chair, I did want to start off with a few questions that we kind of heard from the residents. And the first one being through you to the consultants. Given the input from the residents and what we've heard so far today, I'm just wondering if they could explain a little bit more about why they didn't select a 3-story apartment or stacked townhouses as their building structure.
Okay, I'll go to the applicant, I think, on that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the ward councillor. One of the primary drivers behind the form of development that we're proposing here is really the target demographic. There's a significant empty nester and downsizer market in this area of the city. An apartment form of development is more conducive to that style of living. With the townhouse arrangement, you have multi-floor living, tends to cater more towards a young family demographic. This will be a building with significant amenities. It will have accessible units, elevators built into the building. So that's a significant driver here that's informing the apartment style of construction. The question of 3 versus 4 stories is really one of practicality and costs and ensuring that we're setting up the conditions necessary to ensure that this project is viable to move forward. As you can see from the site plan, we have strategically integrated the parking into the main floor of the building. And so really what you end up with is 3 livable floors. And that's kind of the minimum that's required here in order to ensure that we are setting up the conditions for a viable project that can move forward. So that's a key driver behind the 4 stories. I think the other thing too, as we mentioned, with every site that we're involved with, there's an in-depth technical analysis that's carried out at the outset by planners, engineers, and other technical specialists. We look at the context of each site. Obviously, being a corner site in and of itself is not unique, but being positioned directly adjacent to significant lands planned for high-density residential as tall as 14 stories, looking at the positioning of this property relative to other forms of development in the area, it is truly a logical kind of stepping point for this gentle transition from the two-story forms up to the four. And when you move south on Topping Lane or east, you're going to experience a taller building. So all of those factors are really informing the type and shape of development that we're proposing.
Councillor.
Thank you. Appreciate your explanation. I'm also wondering, I know that between the initial proposal and our current report, you have done a bit of setbacks on the north side. I'm just wondering, given again some of the comments from the residents, were there any other setback considerations you were able to make to try and open up a bit more green space?
I'll go to the applicant.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair. So there's a few things that I'll point out. One thing that was completed prior to finalization of this concept plan was the tree preservation plan, and understanding, what would be the setbacks necessary in order to retain as many as possible. As I noted, there are 5 mature trees along and 2 existing hedges, cedar hedges, along the north property boundary. Those are able to be preserved in this scenario, as are 3 boulevard trees along Eaton Park Drive. We did further increase the north interior yard setback through the planning process from 3 meters to 4.5 to provide a little bit of a greater buffer, to the point where our setback from building face to existing building face on both sides is now generally equal. The other significant change that we undertook was, originally we had proposed 2 driveway locations on Eaton Park. That was going to provide, in our opinion, a more efficient opportunity for waste collection. But obviously, hearing the concerns about traffic and access points on Eaton Park Drive, we have consolidated that into a single access point. It's not, that does come with a significant added cost. We now have to raise the main floor of the building to accommodate a waste collection vehicle navigating into the site. But it was an investment that the developer is willing to make to help improve the quality of the public realm along Eaton Park.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, appreciate that explanation as well. I don't have any current questions, but if other councillors do, I welcome them. I did want to provide some background. So as the ward councillor, I have heard a lot of feedback from this application from local residents, and I thank you all for attending and taking time out of your busy schedules. The majority of feedback, as you've heard, requests for less density, less stories, switching from apartment to townhouses or to a 3-story, as well as rejecting some of the site-specific amendments. And I've also heard from a few residents, they're not here, but I will say that 2 were generally supportive of the application from this area. And we also heard that a lot of residents are wondering why there isn't a development application in for the adjacent property known as the Brick School site, which I will say I have heard from Julo that they have been waiting until they finish other projects before moving forward with that one, but they do plan to bring forward an application in the next year or so. So I have received lots of emails and phone calls, as well as some discussions at my town hall in June, and the residents have been very engaged on this process. Again, I really appreciate their time and effort. I know that a lot of them got up to speed really quickly on development applications and planning matters in the London plan, and I'd like to thank Kim as well, because she's done a lot of great work educating her neighbors and discussing this project. I also have had multiple meetings with the consultants on this file, discussing the possibilities of making some of those changes that the residents have asked for. And while they were able to make that small adjustment for setbacks on the north side, ultimately they didn't make any of the other requested changes and have moved forward with the application at this time. So just want to provide that background. One of the really tough parts I find about being a city councilor is balancing residents' local concerns and citywide priorities. As a city, as was mentioned, we're really focused on building more housing everywhere and providing infill, which, as we know, offers more density and uses existing services. It avoids the costly reliance on sprawl and trying to increase single-family homes on the edge of the city. That said, infill also can, alter neighborhoods and disrupt the livelihood of residents in that neighborhoods and their experiences, and brings new concerns and also new neighbors. So I have heard lots. I've thought long and hard about the application, and overall I've weighed the feedback from residents alongside the development application and our citywide priorities. And I will be supporting this application, much to the disappointment of Topping Lane area residents. I wanted to hear all of their feedback and understand their concerns before making an ultimate decision. But at this point, we do have provincial housing targets we're trying to meet. This would add 55 new units to the area. We have a desperate need for rental units, and so I do think that moving forward with this, while it will be not what the neighbors want, is ultimately in line with our city targets. Infill is the best way that we can use our existing city resources without having to build new roads and new schools and new infrastructure. It is on a bus route and it's near multiple bus routes, so having less parking, I think, hopefully people in this building will understand that they should be using transit and cycling since they won't all have parking spots available, and hopefully being more walkable. And also, just so residents know, I've sat on planning for 2 years, and I pretty much approve every single infill project in other councillors' wards, and so I personally would feel a little hypocritical if I didn't approve them in my ward, but that's my own personal feelings towards infill. So I know you guys will be disappointed, and I'm sorry, and I understand why, but personally, I ran on a platform to address climate change and affordable housing. I do see this as an opportunity for that. So I would like to move the staff recommendation with the added amendment regarding affordable housing units included. I personally will also attempt to work with residents and the applicant to try and make sure that the construction impacts are as minimal as possible, and whatever else I can do to avoid disruption. But again, I understand the residents will be disappointed, so apologies towards you, but I would like to move the staff recommendation given the reasonings.
Okay, we have a motion moved. I'll look for a seconder. Deputy Mayor Lewis, look for comments or questions. Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, through you, Chair, I just want to make sure Councillor Frank is moving her, not the
She-
staff recommendation, but the amended staff recommendation, which includes a discussion with municipal housing.
Thank you for highlighting. That is what she's doing. The clerk has the wording, so if we update our screens, we should be able to see her motion with the amendment regarding affordable housing. Did you want to, Deputy Mayor, are you okay? Okay, good. Any other comments or questions from committee? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I'm not part of this committee, but I do have a number of infills in my ward that I represent, and I appreciate the councillors' comments and also appreciate the importance of still working with the community as well. I do have a question. I found the conversation and thank the public for coming out as well about the rooftop amenity. I know the applicant mentioned that it's a compact development. There will be a rooftop at the top and sort of aimed for that older generation, if I can say it that way. I would like to maybe get a little bit more information on what exactly that rooftop amenity will look like, if there are ideas or plans right now as we approve this compact development.
I'll go to the applicant to kind of highlight kind of what's in mind for that rooftop amenity.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and to the councillor. There's not specific, we don't have a specific detailed kind of landscaping plan yet prepared for the rooftop amenity space. We have worked kind of closely with planning to bake in some regulations in the zoning bylaw that provide some controls and restrictions all around where that amenity space will be located so as to achieve as much separation as possible from existing dwellings. So it's going to be positioned as closely as possible towards the intersection of Topping Lane and Eaton Park Drive. And there will be a combination of a small interior space as well as an exterior space as well. It will be set back a minimum of 3 meters or just over 10 feet from the sort of edge of the building. So again, it's trying to kind of keep it contained and focused as possible and as far away from existing residents as possible.
Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? We have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to 3.9, this is regarding 2060 Dundas Street. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions at this time for staff? Seeing none, I'll look to the applicant. If the applicant would like to address the committee, please, sir, give us your name. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Harry Frusios, Principal Planner with Selenka Priamo Limited, and I'm here today with my colleague Matthew Litvinchuk to present this application to you on behalf of our client, which is the numbered company, the developer, as well as the Diocese of Huron, who is the current landowner. Initially, I want to thank staff for bringing forward a recommendation today. We appreciate their efforts. This is a process that has taken over 5 years, and we certainly appreciate their efforts. Unfortunately, we do not agree with the recommendation before you today, and for the reasons that have been brought forward. Clearly, the staff concerns relate principally with the natural heritage features and the protection of those features and determining a proper development boundary. There don't appear to be any concerns from a land use or intensity perspective, and any concerns raised around the form, again, relate to the natural heritage features. We did submit a letter in advance of today's meeting. It's on the added agenda, and it included a letter and a memo from MTE Consultants regarding their professional opinion on the proposed development from a biological perspective, including support for the proposed boundary of the natural heritage feature and the buffers from the proposed development. We also noted, and this was not included in the staff report, but MTE did provide responses to the latest staff comments and ECAC comments that were provided, and we provided those responses on June the 14th. The MTE memo has concluded that there are no net impacts are anticipated on the natural heritage features as long as proposed mitigation measures are implemented and followed. And their opportunities do exist for net benefit to wildlife habitat and the floristic quality in the retained vegetation patch. So we respectfully request that the committee have regard for MTE's opinion regarding the protection of the natural heritage features based on the recommendations contained in the EIS, where it has been demonstrated that appropriate regard has been made for the provincial policy statement, the London Plan, as well as the city's EMG guidelines for the protection of natural heritage feature. And Ms. Ledbetter and Mr. Heyman, who authored the memo, are in attendance today and can certainly answer any questions that you may have on their opinion. Should PEC see merit in endorsing the application as proposed, we have included a zoning boundary sketch in our submission package, which also was prepared by MTE to be consistent with the recommendations of the EIS. The zoning boundary sketch provides for an OS5 boundary to separate between the natural heritage feature and the remainder of the development site, which would be zoned a site-specific R9-3. And the remainder of the site-specific zoning regulations that are required as part of the development were listed in our attached correspondence as well. So it is our opinion that the proposed zoning boundaries, together with the site-specific zoning regulations, would ensure the continued protection of the natural heritage features. We do note that staff had suggested that we include more land to the south to provide further separation between the proposed building and the natural heritage features. We can assure you that there is no further opportunity to add more land to this development through the landowner, and also that there is no opportunity to share any parking facilities with the existing church site. So considering that we were unable to reach a consensus with staff on the natural heritage matters and the proposed development boundary prior to consideration of this zoning amendment, we do believe that any outstanding matters relating to the access, any compensation that might be required, any issues with UTRCA, those can all be dealt more appropriately through the subsequent planning stages, in other words, towards site plan approval stage. And adding to that, Ms. Heather Jaggard and Mr. Kyle McIntosh are also available online to answer any questions you may have from a hydrogeological or a civil engineering perspective. So in addition to the natural heritage merits that were provided in MTE's memo, we do believe that the proposed development is consistent with London Plan policies relating to use, height, and intensity. It represents an efficient use of vacant underutilized lands. And it provides much needed form of housing for housing in the Argyle community for new residents, as well as those who want to stay and age in place in the Argyle community. We had a public open house on November 24, 2022. There was overwhelming support for this proposed development, and there was quite a few requests to actually for people to secure units within this development. Also, we do acknowledge correspondence that was submitted by the neighboring landowner to the east, Drulo Holdings, and their support for creating an access between the two properties, and we thank them for providing that correspondence.
30 seconds.
Just wrapping up. Thank you. Notwithstanding the staff recommendation, we believe the proposed development of a 6-story apartment building containing 77 units warrants your consideration and recommendation for approval of the applicant's proposed zoning amendment. And thank you for your time, committee. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'll look for any members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. I don't see anyone in the gallery, so I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll put this item on the floor. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, colleagues, I advised you yesterday that I'd be bringing forward an alternate motion on this. I have sent it to the clerk. I did advise that we were continuing to work on language yesterday, so there's been some back and forth. There's also been some technical difficulties because I sent it to the wrong clerk, so it didn't get into eScribe quite in time and get circulated to everybody ahead of the meeting. But I am putting forward an alternate recommendation to approve this proposal. Now, I just want to check with you, Chair, and see if the clerk does have, because I sent it again as an attachment.
I'll let the clerk comment.
Thank you. In eScribe, it's recommendation 5.
Okay, so I'll read it quickly, and then if you'll allow, Chair, I'll provide some rationale. And I do believe that I have a seconder in Councillor Hillier, that notwithstanding the recommendation of the Director of Planning and Development, the following actions be taken with respect to the application related to a portion of the property at 2060 Dundas Street. A proposed bylaw be introduced at the meeting to amend the zoning bylaw Z1 in conformity with the London plan to change a portion of the subject property from a light industrial LI1, LI17 zone and restricted service commercial. There's actually 4 RSC zones on there, 2, 3, 4, and 5, to a residential R9 special provision. So it's an R9-3 and an open space OS5 zone. And that it also be further resolved pursuant to the subsection 34 bracket 17 of the Planning Act, that no further notice be given. It being noted that the amendment is recommended for the following reasons. The recommended amendment is consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2020, which encourages a regeneration of settlement areas and land use patterns that provide a range of uses and opportunities for intensification and redevelopment. And 2, that the recommended amendment would permit a development at an intensity that is appropriate for the site and the surrounding neighborhood. So I'll just see if, Chair, if you can confirm that I have a seconder, and then I'll speak to the rationale here.
Councillor Hillier has confirmed that he will second the motion.
Thank you. So if I can speak to the rationale now. As was mentioned by the applicant, 5 years. This application has been in process almost as long as I've been here at City Hall. It is overwhelmingly supported by the residents of the ward and the congregation of the church and the diocese that is looking to sever a portion of the land. It's the only public meeting I've ever attended for a planning application where there were no objections, where it was universally well received, and in fact, the applicant left with a list of names and emails and phone numbers of people who wanted to be put on the waiting list for these units. It's 78 units of very much needed geared to seniors housing in Ward 2. As the applicant indicated, most of the discussion has been around the quote-unquote wetland and the woodlot feature. And I think it's really important to committee that I put this in some context. There is some woodlot to be preserved, and that's why there is an OS5 component of this proposal. But a significant amount of the coverage on what is being described as a woodlot and a wetland feature is buckthorn. I've been out to the site myself. I know what buckthorn looks like, and I know that it's an invasive species. We're trying to preserve an invasive species on a big chunk of this land. I don't think that's the intent of our woodlot and our tree protection bylaws. And regardless, the applicant is actually committed to preserving the woodlot. They actually have realigned this building in this location on the property twice to get the maximum amount of preservation of the feature as it is. The drainage issue, and I'm going to call it a drainage issue because I continue to, I do support what MTE has done with the ESI. And looking at the history of this site, you know, if you start looking from 1998, aerial photography that's available even on the city's website, up until 2004, COPS was using this to stockpile things. It wasn't anything except really an inventory lot, similar to what Drulo has a couple properties down. Only in 2004, when COPS finally ceased and moved their operations away from there, did this area even start to get wet. And I would argue that's in part because of the man-made drainage ditch that is under Dundas Street that runs along the city's unopened road allowance. We created this man-made feature because of the drainage ditch that we put in. So when we're talking about wetland, what we're really talking about in significant part here is actually just stormwater management, which can be accommodated in a development application through site plan work. And really, even more importantly, when you look at the feature piece, and again, you go back through the aerial photos, it doesn't even really start to appear significant until about 2016, 2017. So this growth is not that old. And there would be a compensation piece required, and the city has land immediately to the north that the applicant has offered to provide tree planting compensation on. I've been a part of the conversations with our staff. Our parks team does not want to commit to allowing that land to be the location for compensation until a decision is made on the zoning. But the applicant is willing to enhance the city's own land to the north with compensation to make up for the work that they're doing on this site. I cannot stress enough as the ward councillor, I am ready to see this move forward. We need this housing. If we don't approve this, I will tell you that what we're going to have is another unused piece of land sitting there for decades to come because the consent with the church to sever the land will die. The church has already come back once and gone through a long process to transfer to the applicant a little bit more land in the consent for severance. They will not give any more. That's actually part of what has held up this application, not the only piece, but it is part of it because there's a long process for a diocese to make a decision to sell off land. They have done that now twice. The severance actually expired once already, so a new consent for severance has to come in along as well. But there is no other option here. So what we're going to have is a large piece of vacant land behind the church, which, by the way, with Mount Batten, has an existing neighborhood behind it. Even the neighbors there, once they found out the access was on Dundas, no longer had any concerns. There was originally some transportation concerns, but that's all been addressed through multiple changes to the site plan. So I'm really encouraging colleagues to support this alternate recommendation. As the applicant mentioned, there will still be some things to work through site plan, with compensation, with the water management, but there is providing an open zone and an R9 on this space to respect both the existing woodlot and the opportunity for residential development.
Thank you. I'll look for any other speakers from the committee. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I do have some questions for staff on this file. So through the chair to staff, I'm just pulling them up. I was wondering regarding the EIS to me, because this site is somewhat complex, in my opinion. I'm not following it as closely as the ward councillor, obviously. So I'm just wondering, based on the EIS, it looked like there was 2 different scoping in each. I'm just wondering, how did the mapping change between the first draft of the EIS and the second one?
I'll go staff.
Through the chair, the 2022 version of the EIS notes that the entire area included as light green is significant woodland and recognizes that per our policies and based on the environmental management guidelines framework. However, the resubmission in 2024 removes these areas from significance and only acknowledges the wetland component of the feature. So that would be the reason that the mapping changed between the 2 versions.
Councillor.
Thank you. That makes some sense. And I'm just also wondering why these features are considered significant from the staff side. I also did a site visit on the weekend, and I did notice buckthorn, but I also noticed things like cottonwoods and aspen. So I'm just wondering, given that they're all mixed together, you know, how is the decision made to determine that these are significant?
Go to staff.
Through the chair, the environmental management guidelines has us go through a woodland evaluation process. The scoring is based either high, medium, or low on multiple criteria. And a score of 1 high establishes that the feature is considered significant. There is a hydric feature on this site in the form of the deciduous mineral marsh or swamp marsh that is on the site, and that immediately scores 1 high. Therefore, the entire area associated with that and the woodland that is contiguous with that wetland feature is considered significant woodland. It's a very challenging conversation to begin to parse out feature components that are invasive based on the fact that they are invasive. We would many of our ESAs have instances of invasive species throughout, and it would set an undue precedent whereby unmanaged lands could become unconstrained simply by having invasive species on them. So our delineation rationale in the EMGs specifically includes the entire feature component, not simply the wetland piece.
Councillor.
Thank you, appreciate that. My understanding is the EIS report hasn't been accepted by staff, so maybe that's, correct me if I'm wrong. And then I'm just trying to understand what are the deficiencies then within the EIS, given that it hasn't been accepted by staff, from my understanding.
I'll go staff.
Through the chair, that is correct. The 2022 version was much closer to something that staff would accept. We sent back comments and a completely new report appeared for the 2024 version. Hence, we were able to provide those figures to demonstrate to committee. In terms of the deficiencies, at this stage, we are looking to establish and agree on the delineation of the features and establish the significance of their associated functions. And because we are not able to agree on that at this point, we aren't able to move forward in the process to the other EIS components, such as establishing buffers. The compensation discussion from our perspective is a non-starter insofar as Parks is unwilling to provide land associated with that work. And the mitigation hierarchy that we are compelled to follow per the provincial policy statement and is initiated by establishing if we can avoid feature destruction, moving on to if we can mitigate the associated impacts, and then finally compensating for any if you are unable to avoid the feature itself, so compensating for that loss. We don't believe that we are at the compensation stage and that some of these issues can be addressed through either mitigation, but predominantly through avoidance.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that background. I'd been hoping that this would have come forward perhaps with less parking or avoiding some of having the parking or the building within the buffer zone or within the actual feature itself, because obviously, as the previous application, I love infill even in my own ward when it's contentious. But at this point, given a lot of the issues have just been raised and discussed with regarding the EIS and the existence of a wetland and a woodlot on this property. And I understand that, I'm sure that the applicant has done their very best to try to avoid it, but it still is a fairly significant amount that's within the buffer zone. I personally, I know that the EMGs are guidelines, but I do think that they're there for a reason. And I think that this goes beyond. Would I be willing to alter from the EMGs? I try to stick to them as closely as possible, and this is a significant variance from them. So I won't be supporting this design as is, although I do want to see infill on this site, but not specifically this one, given the deficiencies with the EIS. So unfortunately, apologies to the ward councillor, but I won't be able to support this for the environmental reasons.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion moved and seconded. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me again. I'm going to try and be brief. I appreciate Councillor Frank's points. I didn't expect to have her support on this, but I think that from my perspective, from the ward perspective, it's also important to share through the time that this application has been in various iterations as we've tried to find a way forward. And I want to be very clear, this is not meant to be a criticism of the current staff who are working on it. But we've had 3 different ecologists from the city side providing comment on this file, and those comments have not been consistent throughout. So when we have a situation where staff's commentary changes from staff person to staff person as files are inherited, that to me really emphasizes the guideline part. It's open to interpretation. These are guidelines. They are not regulations. And that's a really important difference that I think needs to be underlined. And again, just as our staff have some different opinions, MTE, also professionals in their field, have a different opinion yet again. So I'm really encouraging colleagues to approve the zoning and let the applicant and our staff, and probably at some point Upper Thames as well, work through some of the specific details, because as to the comment that we heard from our staff, mitigation there are still mitigation opportunities here. I actually agree with that. I think there are still some opportunities for mitigation, but that comes through a detailed site plan, not through more studies and more back and forth on whether or not we're going to allow residential here. So I do encourage colleagues to please support this.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Frank.
Thank you, yes, and I appreciate you reminded me of one thing I did want to add. I understand that there were 3 ecologists from our staff team on this site. I also understand that there are 2 from MTE who also had very different opinions, so perhaps 5 different ecologists in the kitchen is too many ecologists on this file. But yeah, I suppose if this moves forward, we'll see how it all shakes out in site plan, and given that Upper Thames, I think, has already said that they are unwilling to offer Section 28, we'll see how that turns out as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. Appreciate the discussion here. Just had a question for staff regarding what's in front of us right now. I understand that this isn't what staff had put forward or had presented as a recommendation, but I'm wondering if it gives enough of an opportunity to put in mitigations just based on the conversation that we're having. To me, it seems too loosely defined to be able to put in proper mitigations. I'm just wondering if we can do anything to tighten that up a little bit more to allow that.
Go to staff.
We typically find that when these environmental items are pushed to the site plan phase, that we lose a lot of our capacity to ensure that they are appropriately implemented. Typically, site plan is not when you are addressing the environmental constraints. You do it on the front end during zoning and establish your developable limit at the outset. Again, there are minor mitigations that are addressed through site plan, but large wide brush pieces like compensation and those are things that we would want to address at this stage, and it's unclear if we would be able to fully have them implemented at a subsequent phase.
Counselor?
Thank you. I appreciate the answer. For that reason, I won't be supporting what's being proposed.
Thank you. I'd like to turn the chair over to Councillor Rahman, if I could.
Thank you. I have the chair. Councillor Lamb, go ahead.
So thank you. It's been a good discussion. Just been, observing my thought, or just having some thoughts on what we've seen in this discussion and what has occurred today and what occurs many times in planning. Whenever we do infill is a major tool for ourselves to get to our target of 47,000 homes. And every time we do infill, there's impact. Now, a lot of impact, quite frankly, is on people. I mean, today we had a petition of 60 people that felt that their lives were going to be impacted, and which I don't disagree with, quite frankly, for the development that we approved. For us today is a development request in the East End that has impact on some natural heritage features. There's been different opinions on the level of that, but in my opinion, not significant. If it was, we wouldn't hear that differing opinion. So yeah, I'm gonna accept that impact because we could get up to 78 units or thereabouts in this development. And it's development in the East End, and that's where I see significant opportunity for infill. We've covered the northwest. I believe the East End is really a key opportunity for us to find lands that aren't being used right now for much-needed housing. So for those reasons, I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Returning the chair to you with no one on the speaker's list.
Thank you. I'll look for any further comments from committee members. Seeing none, we have a motion moved and seconded, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-2.
Thank you. Move on now to items for direction. We have one item, 4.1, and this is regarding communication from Upper Thames. And we do have a request for a delegation from Mr. Petrie. So I'll look for to get a motion on the floor to allow that delegation. Councillor Frank's motioned it. I got a seconder from Councillor Rahman, and we'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Please, sir, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair Lehman and the rest of the PEC committee. Most of what I wanted to say is in the letter and the correspondence that I sent to the committee. Really here to answer questions. Really, we heard at the board that council really wants to find ways to not have Upper Thames affect their budget. And this is one of the areas that we found is that with a fee freeze that's been placed on us by the ministry, we don't have the ability to switch those costs to user fees, and it all has to come back through levy. So this has been going on for a couple of years. We did meet with the minister, a group of us, about 3 months ago, and he was really open to feedback about all the changes that have made in the Conservation Act, and certainly he was open to discussion about this, but he did ask, give me some feedback and some evidence. So this is why we're here today. We're going around to every municipality that's a member of the Upper Thames and making sure that we get that feedback, seeing where everybody is. But really, we want to do everything we can to mitigate costs to our largest member municipality. You're paying 64% of the bill. There's a significant amount of funds that can be coming from user fees that we're just not able to do right now. So we're under 30% funding from user fees in this area, and we did have a plan prior to the fee freeze to increase that, but again, that's been put on hold. So we'd like your help. You're a big voice, and so we'd like to have that with the province to be able to say, hey, let us do the same thing the city does, set our fees to a usable amount where we can recoup the costs that make us viable. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I'll put this item on the floor now for council. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. If you'll allow, I just want to, through you, see if our delegate can respond to just a couple of quick questions. I know that we approved a service review funding piece for Upper Thames. I just wonder if he can provide any information on how far along we are with that. I believe we provided $200,000 for a service review for efficiencies. I am certainly not opposed to asking the province to lift the fee freeze. And I just wonder, because we've got a budget allocation, I know it's not lost on you as a municipal representative that property tax dollars are few and far between, and it's much better if we can get income and consumer taxes from the province. So can you tell us how things are proceeding, or we may be too early in the process, but is there any opportunity to provide us an update on where the service review is, and whether you're currently expecting to come back with yet another budget ask of the partner municipalities, or with the service review and potentially getting these fee freezes lifted, if you'll be in better shape that way?
Mr. Petrie?
Certainly, to answer the first part of the question, I know it's at staff levels right now. The board does not meet in July, and so we'll be meeting in August, and I expect we'll see an update on that. So certainly still willing to move forward with always trying to make us as streamlined as possible and be as efficient as possible that way. We value that investment. With the second part, you know, these have the chance to have really significant amounts of dollars come into our coffers, which can save your coffers. So we're not talking $10,000, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you're the biggest shareholder, if that's put that way, and you'll be the biggest benefitor, because that's just the way it works. So certainly, I know that staff and the board are looking at every stone to go, okay, how do we make it more efficient? We didn't like coming, nobody around that table, we're all elected officials. We didn't like coming to our municipalities with the large increase that we did. We certainly don't want to repeat that this year. I don't think we will, but it's all pieces of the puzzle to make it come together.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope you won't this year, because we do a multi-year budget. I know other municipalities may not be in that boat, but, and I appreciate that the board doesn't meet in July. I wish more boards wouldn't meet in July. Honestly, I think we can all use a break now and then, but I do appreciate knowing that it's at the staff level and that things are moving forward there. Through you, Chair, I'm prepared to move the request that the mayor be directed to, on council's behalf, communicate to the province a need to lift the fee freeze for the conservation authorities.
I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Frank, any further discussion? We have a motion moved in second. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we don't have any deferred matters or additional business to discuss, so we'll move to the confidential side of things. I'll ask staff to prepare the room for that portion.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we're back. I'll look to the deputy mayor to report out.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I am happy to report out the progress was made on the item for which we went into confidential session.
Thank you. That brings us to adjournment. I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Frank, second by Councillor Robin. Hand vote.
The motion carries 5-0.
Thanks, everyone.